Hi friends, Tara Boston-Kemper here, founder and clinical director of the Counseling Hub and practicing therapist slash counselor, same thing, in the state of Missouri. So this video is going to be about anxiety. Yay! The thing that everybody loves. I'm not going to explain what anxiety is. What I'm going to focus on really is I'm going to break down real quick for you the factors that influence anxiety, because there's not just one, obviously. And then I'm going to get into a little more depth with one of those factors in particular. And this is probably going to be one in a series of videos where I'm getting into depth with each of the different factors. And I'm going to start with existential today. First, the breakdown though. So when I think of anxiety, whenever I conceptualize it and try to understand the way that it exists in the world with people, I think about it in a few different ways. First, there is a physical, biological, genetic component. That's way number one. And again, I'll do a different video on each of these things later, but it's too much to do in one. I also think of it in terms of evolutionarily speaking, like from an evolutionary perspective. That's another factor. The third one that I think of it is, I think of it in terms of cognitive, like our thoughts, our cognitions, the mental aspect, basically. And one other that's wrapped up in there, and I'm just going to say it, people who've been through trauma. So that to me is housed under physical, biological, because it's showing up in such a physical and biological way. And then the last one is existential. So there's four different parts of this, and each one you can go in depth with. And again, today in particular, I'm focusing on existential, which is one of my favorites. So when we're talking about existential anxiety, there are four things that I always come back to. And I got these this is from Yalom, and I'm sure his stuff is based on existential philosophers and thinkers and ways of thought. So we're at this trickle-down phase that it's showing up for me, or I'm talking about it, in a particular way. So existential anxiety, I'm thinking of four different things. Number one, death, which is fun to talk about. Number two, that's sarcasm if you can't tell. Number two, which is isolation. Number three, which is meaning. And number four, which is freedom. So Yalom referred to these as the four conditions of being human. And basically what he's saying is that, and the way that I understand it, that's probably a better way of saying it. The way that I understand these four conditions of being human is that they are literally things we cannot escape. And they cause intense anxiety. They're things we don't have control over. They're things we don't fully understand. They're things that we don't know when they're going to show up. Some exist all the time. They're things that are terrifying in a lot of different ways. So with death in particular, in a lot of cases, whether you're religious or spiritual or not, or atheist or agnostic, I don't care. Religion in a lot of ways, and some spirituality in a lot of ways, serves to minimize some fear around death, minimize some of the terror that is associated with it. Because it says, this is what's going to happen after you die. For folks who don't believe that, or for folks who question that, or for folks who don't fully buy into, we know exactly what's going to happen after death, it's terrifying because we don't know what's going to happen. And that's where some of the existential, the dread and the anxiety and the fear comes in, is that you don't know what's going to happen, and it leaves you with this feeling of terror, basically. Yeah, I'm going to leave that there. I'm just going to leave it at that. That second piece, so again, we're talking about conditions of being human, so that's one of them. The second piece is isolation. So isolation in terms of, when we think about our bodies, for example, they are what is referred to as a closed system. So if I had an instructor do this once, looking at you, Katoni, that was his name. He would say, take your finger and press it on the desk in front of you. What do you feel? And everyone would say, well, we feel the desk. And he would say, no, you feel the neurons firing from the pressure that's on your body. But you don't feel the desk. You feel your neurons, and you're getting a message to your brain that there's something that's right there. And not in that way exactly. You did it much more eloquently. But that's what I mean by closed systems. So we're not actually interacting with a person. When you hug a human, you're not what you're feeling is what you feel on the inside. If something is numb, for example, you don't feel anything. That's what it means. And so, and again, he probably says that much more eloquently than I did right there, but that's the gist of the isolation piece. It also goes into, you can be with someone really intimately and you can know someone really, really well, but you can't ever really fully know another person. So if my husband gets a shot and he says, that hurt on a 7 on a scale of 1 to 10, and I get a shot and I'm like, that was only a 2. We got the exact same shot. We are in the exact same location when we got the shot. Everything's the exact same except for the fact that his rating was a 7 and mine was a 2. We're in isolation from one another. When we die, for example, this ties back in with death anxiety. We do it alone. Even if you're with people when you die, you're not walking to the pearly gates with them, unless you believe that. And if you don't believe it, you're not doing something like that. It's a solo experience, which is horrifying because, again, we're social creatures, we're social animals, and we experience life in isolation in a lot of ways. So that has nothing to do with social support. So don't confuse isolation with social support. They're totally different things. The third existential the third factor, I'll say, the third condition of being human is meaning. So when I talk about meaning, this is a lot of where, if anybody knows Viktor Frankl or Man's Search for Meaning, it's really about that. So when humans don't have a purpose for why they're here, or what they're doing in the world, or what they're doing with their life, we feel meaningless. I don't know who said this, but it's, it becomes, we are meaning-making creatures and we're in a meaningless world that in and of itself, life doesn't have meaning. And if some of you are probably like, you are crazy, Tara. None of these things are true. That's fine. You can believe that. And these are the thoughts of existential anxiety and, existential therapy, for example, the conditions of being human. This is the mind. This is the way anxiety is conceptualized. That's a better way of saying it. So when we do talk about meaning, is that there is no meaning inherent in the things that we do, but we're the ones that provide meaning to it. And if you think about your life, you're likely doing things that you value, and you're likely doing things that are important to you and that seem really rewarding in some ways. That's because we create meaning. We do it on our own. When we don't have that, when we don't feel like we're doing important things or things that are necessary or things that make a difference, or we're not doing things that are relevant for us, we feel purposeless. We can feel aimless. We can feel untethered. We can feel adrift. We can feel like we're just kind of floating through life. All of those things happen to a lot of people, and a lot of that has to do with meaning in life. So the last one is freedom. So this one is exceptionally counterintuitive. Often we think that we want more and more freedom and we want more and more choices and we want to be able to do all the things all the time. We want everything. The reality is that I think Kierkegaard put it best. He was an existential philosopher, one of the original, I guess. I don't really know. But he said dizziness is the No. He said anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. If you think about it like this, if you were to be surrounded by nothingness and you got to create things for yourself, it wouldn't necessarily be relaxing. It would be intense. And it would feel anxiety-provoking that you're the one that has to create the structure, and you're the one that has to make these big decisions, and you're the one that creates your life in a very specific way. And even with little kids, for example, you give them 3 choices at the ice cream shop. You don't let them look at all 50 flavors and decide. You say, look, you can choose between chocolate, strawberry, and vanilla. Have at it, kid. Choose. The alternative is really overwhelming. That doesn't go away. So when we're older, yeah, we can manage making a 1 decision out of 50 choices, or we get 2 scoops and we get 2 decisions, right, out of 50 choices of ice cream. But in everyday life, we thrive on things like structure. when we can trust that something is in place and that something has our back. Again, I go back to religion and spirituality in some ways. And for atheists, like ethical values, moral values, we want structure in our lives. And when we don't have it, it creates anxiety. And you see this again with little kids. You see this with animals. You see this with people. It's a consistent finding. You can see it when you look for it. That's why we have rules. I mean, it just shows up everywhere. So here's the thing with existential anxiety. I'm trying to wrap this video up because it went on much longer than I anticipated. We cannot get rid of these 4 conditions of being human. And that's, people don't like, nobody wants to hear that. We want to hear, how do we get rid of this? How do we make it go away? With meaning, you can kind of get rid of it by creating meaning in your life. You know, you can create purpose for yourself. And I don't mean purpose in a life coachy sort of way, like find your passion, be purposeful. That's my bad. I have good friends that are life coaches, but I don't mean purpose in that sort of way where it's like catchy and, you know, a buzzword or something. I mean, literally, it's something that you find valuable, that you find meaningful, that you can live for. That's how you create purpose. It might very well be you're the only one that knows your grandmama's spaghetti sauce recipe. That's it. So you have to be the one to make it every Christmas. That's purpose. It seems silly, right? It seems little. It doesn't matter. It's whatever's meaningful for you. Things like death, things like isolation, those are things we can't really get rid of. They just kind of exist. You can talk about it and process it and try to accept that it's a thing. And the sooner you accept that as a thing, the less anxiety provoking it becomes. And then even something like freedom, we alleviate that anxiety that comes along with freedom by creating structure for ourselves. We give ourselves routines, we give ourselves schedules, we have set jobs, we're consistent in certain ways. That's so we show up consistently and we don't feel that level of anxiety around being aimless or being adrift or, you know, not having structure in place, for example. Whew, it's a long video. So those are my thoughts. I would love to hear yours. And I write about this on my blog too. If you go to thecounselinghub.com, there's a blog section. Just click on it. You'll see more about anxiety, especially existential. Like I said, it's one of my favorites. If you have feedback, questions, comments, leave it below. Subscribe to the video for more like it, and or shoot me an email. You can reach me at Tara, T-A-R-A, at thecounselinghub.com, and I will be happy to respond to anything that comes up for you. So otherwise, have a great day. Don't let the existential anxiety set in too strongly. You can get through it. It's okay. It doesn't go away, but you can deal with it. So have a great day. I'll talk to you later. Okay, bye.